I 32 resent my boyfriend 32 about introducing kinky sex and polyamory to me. Long story short, I was always a deeply sexual person, but growing up in a non-Western culture as Korea, I was never exposed to kinky or bosom culture. I am bisexual, yet I had a happy vanilla, monogamous relationship with my ex-boyfriend for about 6 years. When I came to the US, broke up with him and explored the dating/hookup scene. I had some shitty experiences. There was an attractive athlete guy who told me I had my ex-girlfriend fucked by 5 black men, and that was the best. Are you kinky? Or a muscular Russian guy who almost used a Korean woman as his sex toy without a consent. She barely spoke English. He said he later tried to pimp her out, his friend, and she finally cried and resisted. All these stories were shocking and lowered my self-esteem a bit. And then I slept with my current boyfriend. I'd known him for about 2 years. We were both international students in the same program, and sorta wrote him off because he didn't look like a serious person. Too sex positive. I didn't know the word sex positive back then, and bisexual. But after going through all the bad guys in the dating market, I gave him a chance, and we started all the kinky things together. It was a Christmas break, and things got sorta magical. We got totally caught in passion. We did lots of crazy stuff: rope, toys, in the car, collar, socks, foot stuff, and it blew my mind. He suddenly looked like a prince, and I fell in love. Somehow he looked above my league. He's tall, preppy, blond, blue-eyed, well-educated, well-travelled, and has a charming extroverted personality. When we started a sort of long-distance relationship, and he demanded an open relationship. I never knew the concept of polyamory or open relationship before, but it made sense, and I gave it a try. It was a rocky road. I agreed with the open relationship term partially because I was madly in love, wouldn't stop thinking about him a second, and I wanted to keep it. But for the first couple months, I never slept with anyone while he was hooking up with other kinky men for some fetish stuff. He even made me say hi to one of his former male hookups who was Chinese, which I felt was humiliating as a woman and as an Asian person. He had all good intention because he believed in polyamory and ethical non-monogamy. But I was not philosophically prepared for that. In retrospect, I would have refused to do that. But at that time I did, because somehow I wanted to assimilate with the new culture that he introduced. I had the desperate need to assimilate with the Western culture. But then I realized that he's actually leaning towards submissive. So I started pegging him with a strap-on dildo. I bought that in a nearby adult toy store and brought it to his place. Since receiving anal sex was his ultimate taboo in his life, he got totally hit by that and started feeling really attached to me. In some sense I messed him up the same way he messed me up. He said I turned the table ... He denies that that is the reason why he fell in love with me. But I sometimes still suspect so. After I started doing that, his attitude towards me changed a lot, thinking that way doesn't give me a pleasant feeling. While we were separate spatially, he continued to hook around, and it bothered me. For example, he hooked up with a gay man. The guy tried to use popper on himself, a chemical drug that functions as a muscle relaxant, and by mistake spilled it into my vagina. Also, he once sucked a man's thing without a condom, and I found it upsetting because of the risk. The biggest thing that upset me was that he started watching sissification, cross-dressing, and being a submissive like a girl porn/hentai. At this point I was totally exhausted. Before then, I could make sense of most of the new concepts he introduced to me, such as polyamory, open relationship, kinks, bondage, and male bisexuality. Even though I had to process a lot, I tended to overthink, read a lot to understand him, and tried to become an open-minded, mother-like figure who can understand most of his secrets and kinks and imperfections. I was repelled by what I saw on FetLife, kinky people's Facebook, but still tried to understand all of that. But when he started sending me cross-dressing, shopping mall websites and sissification hentais, it was the last straw. I said I can't take this anymore, and I don't want to continue the relationship. He reacted to me in very disappointing ways, such as getting angry, resentful, and saying that he's gonna cancel everything we planned. and he also tried to sell one of my tickets to his friend. I think he reacted to me in a childish way, and it was another big turn-off. Well, the thing was, we already booked lots of trips together. I was very depressed at that time, and I didn't want to give up on all the trips, and I read some stupid toxic relationship coaching in my native language saying that you should put up with your man's things one more time when you want to give up everything, so I went to his place again. Then we reconciled. He stopped watching sissy stuff and fervently convinced me that it's not his primary kinks. He can stop completely. He still had fantasies about threesomes, so he organized a session with me and a transgender man, but ended up engaging in the threesome session. It was interesting. The trans guy was very respectful. It was another attempt of mine to try to assimilate into the Western culture, since threesome is much more common and casually accepted here. Well, did I like it? It was not something I was hugely into, but I just thought that I would keep seeing him until I found someone better. ... I was lonely, and I was not brave enough to lose him. Since he became more and more affectionate, last winter he was still organizing fetish sessions with other kinky men, and I let him do so, without even caring too much. Well, he does extremely low-risk activities in terms of and he doesn't emotionally connect with them. So I started getting accustomed to that in a nonchalant way. Arvid came, and now I'm quarantined with him for 7 months now. Things are very fine. He cooks and cleans for me. We've been to lots of nice places together. We are sort of official now as a couple. We have quite a lot of sex, a little less frequently, with less energy. I perform less wild things. I watch a lot of porns and FetLife profile. I organized a threesome with a guy I met on Tinder myself, and I had a lot of fun. I developed some disturbing sex fantasies where I worshipped the body, which I feel like I should stop fantasizing about. So the thing is, my boyfriend became very affectionate to me after all, and treats me like a queen. I'm still sorta affectionate to him, even though not sure I love him. I think I've been way too traumatized by the introduction of the whole new world, kinky sex/polyamory, and still didn't recover that much. I wonder if this is some sort of Stockholm syndrome where you fall in love with someone who traumatized and hurt you. I have a huge urge to talk about these things to people from my culture, Korea. But all these things sound way too foreign and monstrous and horrible. I once posted this stuff to one of the feminist forums in my native language, and the reaction was super negative. People are not familiar with kinks, bdsm, and sex-positive stuff. I feel a bit isolated from my culture. I'm not sure I'm that sex-positive either. Though, don't read. I got traumatized by kinky sex and polyamory stuff that boyfriend introduced to me, even though now I got a bit used to that. I still feel resentful about it, and I don't have people to talk. What should I do? I'm curious who told you that engaging in kink again, something which is fine to do privately, was a part of assimilating into Western culture. That way of thinking is incredibly toxic, and I find it difficult to believe you reached it entirely on your own. The stuff you were engaging in is pretty fringe here, not that there's necessarily anything wrong with it. But what is wrong is that you felt like you had to do it to be accepted culture. I hate responses on here that are like get therapy, because I think finding a good therapist is really difficult, and it can be expensive. That said, it seems like a sex therapist wouldn't be the worst idea in the world, since you don't have anyone else you feel like you can talk to. It honestly sounds like your boyfriend is deeply addicted to sex and convinced you that engaging in all these different kinks and fetishes would empower you, despite the fact that he did a lot of things you weren't okay with and dragged you into other things which you weren't particularly interested in. I guess all I can say is that I'm really sorry that this happened to you, and that you don't really owe anything to any cult. It sounds like you are being torn between what I personally think are probably sexually conservative norms in Korean culture and what you have perceived as a more sexually open Western culture. And as your boyfriend drew you towards the latter, even if the idea of Western culture being a no-rules, kink fest is a fiction, you felt more isolated in the former. It sounds cheesy, but you've got to just be yourself and find someone that will respect that, and that you are able to do the things you want to do with them without worrying about whether or not you are being true to any cultural expectation. Culture isn't a prison. It evolves constantly because people borrow the things from it which are important to them, and modify or add where they feel it is lacking. Don't lose yourself. As a Korean American woman myself, I know how hard it is to talk about sex openly with other Korean people because of the judgment and such. But if you need to talk to someone about this, you can do me. Also, I highly suggest you do go see your therapist because you did all those things that you weren't super comfortable to do. For any sex, it should be consensual without coercion. Also, don't let your loneliness be the only thing attaching you to him, because you deserve someone who loves you for you without making you do uncomfortable things. Also, it's not fair to your boyfriend that might love you if you're not in love with them. It's not fair for you both. You should find a therapist. If you can find one who's Korean or familiar with similar cultures, that'd be best. Edit, you should also reconsider your relationship with your boyfriend. Most people in this are not particularly kinky or polyamorous. If that is not what you want in your sex life, you won't have much trouble finding people who share your perspective.